This is a great honor for me to be here, standing in front of you as you're heading out into the world. I doubt I'm the first person to ask you this, but why did you study communication? Newspapers are closing down. There's maybe a quarter the foreign correspondents that there were a decade ago. The number of jobs in radio and film have been slashed. And these days, anyone cozy at home can write about anything, and everyone can read it immediately and for free. You're the generation when journalism reportedly died. Now, you're also the generation that needs journalism and communications generally, more than ever. You've grown up with more war than there has ever been in American history. Think about it. Most of you were 10 or 11 years old when 9/11 happened. We all remember that day. Planes crashing, towers coming down, huge bravery, huge sorrow. The 10 years of war in Afghanistan that followed probably didn't touch most of you directly, but we were all reminded how it all started when Osama bin Laden was killed a few weeks ago. Unlike in World War II or Vietnam, there's no draft now. So for better or worse, these wars, and we're fighting 3 of them now, are fought by those who volunteer for them. That doesn't mean these wars should be ignored. In fact, everyone here is in a position to stoke the coals and the awareness to end these wars. And that's one major reason that communication, the field you just finished studying here, and that I studied at Boston University, is so essential. The need to know, to spread knowledge, and to witness has never been more important. And for all the uncertainty, it's also a great time to be a communicator. I am a war photographer. And when I first started covering the war in Kosovo in 1998, I worked with a 35mm camera, and I had to heat and mix my chemicals in the field. It took forever. Digital cameras, and just as importantly, the high-speed technology to transmit those images all over the world and all over the web makes these photographs available everywhere. Ordinary people with cell phones have documented the tragedy and triumph of historic changes in the Middle East and in Africa. A child and his mother shot in Syria, dictators deposed in Egypt and Tunisia. A new world is being born, politically and technologically, and this is your time to embrace it. I know that many of you are wondering how, in this awful economy, and with the business so depressed, you'll ever find a job. Yes, it's very bad. I can tell you, though, it's never been easy. This is a tough industry, and the job itself is challenging as well. But where there's a need, there's opportunity. I graduated in 1992, and Professor Peter Smith, whose class I took on Comm Ave, gave me a job making prints and working as his studio assistant when he had a business in the South End. After a few more odd jobs, I finally got my first newspaper job in Troy, Ohio. This was really an internship at a small town paper, and the only place that offered me something after sending about 100 really embarrassingly lame portfolios around the country. It paid almost nothing, but I was green, and this is the opportunity that I'd been waiting for. Troy is small, a village by some means, so the newspaper wasn't hard to find when I arrived there. It's just down the street from the fountain that's dyed red during the annual Strawberry Festival. The chief photographer, a guy named Chris Hondros, met me in front of the newspaper building, and I was surprised how such a young guy, a guy my age, was running the photo department at a newspaper, even in a small town like Troy. A few days into my internship, where I was looking forward to being guided and taught how to be a newspaper photographer, he announced that he was leaving to go to graduate school. I could not believe it. With one of only 2 photographers at the paper leaving, I was supposed to figure out how to run the newspaper or the whole photo department. Hondros reassured me. "You'll figure it out. It's easy," he said. Before moving on to more important things, such as inviting me over to his apartment that night to drink beer and watch him pack up all his belongings. That's actually an entertaining evening in Troy, so I accepted his offer. As the only newspaper photographer left, I inherited his job and the answer to my question how to become chief photographer right out of college. Go where no one else wants to be, stick it out, and see what happens. Get your feet wet on a small stage. Any stage where you can practice your craft and apply the ethics that you've learned here. The lessons and mistakes that you learn will prepare you for the bigger things you'll tackle later. I did this again when I moved to Kenya, also with no assignment, and it led to a contract job with the New York Times. I later quit that contract that I had worked so hard to get to pay my own way to Afghanistan, where the war was just beginning. That move, and a lot of work and luck, ended up landing me a staff job. I didn't realize it at the time, but this rule applied to just about every other place in the world I've worked, and remains my best advice for people who want to get out there and start working. Don't wait for someone to give you a dream job or even an assignment in any field of work, because there's a good chance that's not going to happen until you've proven yourself. Find a place where something's going on that's relatively interesting, move there, and live cheaply. You'll definitely get lonely, at times hungry, and you'll probably wonder what you're doing at wasting your education this way. But everything will fall into place. You are creators and innovators, but being in a field like this can churn you up like a meat grinder. You won't make much money, but the rewards are much more valuable, and they will come with persistence and belief in yourself. I thought that watching Chris Hondros, my first boss, pack up his belongings in Troy was the last time I would see him. But our careers followed a remarkably similar path for the next 15 years. A few years later, we worked at sister newspapers in North Carolina, hanging out occasionally on weekends. We left those jobs around the same time to try and freelance during the war in Kosovo. And after 9/11, we were swept into the tide that draws a group of photographers and journalists from one war to the next. Hondros, no one ever called him Chris, it was always just Hondros, quickly climbed to the top of his profession, and he took some of the most famous and memorable photographs in Iraq and countless other conflicts, including Libya. I've covered conflict in Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, and also Libya. For better or worse, this has become my calling and my passion. But I'm certainly not going to recommend the job to anyone. That's a choice only you can make. I can't say that my family and friends love the risks that come with the job, and I've questioned my choice more than once. It can be dangerous, not just for you, but for the people you work with, your local translators and drivers, without whom your story would never get out to the world. There are hard choices, often with no clear answers, as I was reminded of about 8 weeks ago in eastern Libya. I was captured with 3 others from the New York Times by pro-Gaddafi soldiers and the rebel-controlled city of Ajdabiya, which that day was being heavily rocketed as they prepared to occupy the city by force. As the fighting intensified, I photographed civilians running in the streets for cover and rebel fighters taking up defensive positions besides cafes and along a broad boulevard flanked by apartment buildings. Despite warnings that government soldiers had entered the city, I ignored the signs until it was too late. Moments after taking my final photographs of rebels with rocket-propelled grenades in front of a housing complex, I gathered with my Times colleagues and our driver, Mohammed, a 21-year-old student who we had been working with for the past week, and sped through the streets to the city gate and the safety beyond. Within moments of moving from the crush of the city, we saw another grouping of soldiers on the road. More rebels, I assumed. But within seconds, the harsh reality set in. This was the other side, and we were captured. Their roadblock of militia soldiers, tanks, pickup trucks swallowed us instantly. And within seconds, I was being dragged violently at gunpoint from the passenger seat. In that very moment of panic, our captors, with guns drawn at us, were simultaneously attacked by the rebels who I had just been photographing a few moments before, right around the corner. In a hail of incoming gunfire, I broke free from the soldier who was holding me and ran for cover behind a small building next to the road. I saw a village in the distance and briefly considered making a break for it, but before I could make up my mind, I was quickly recaptured along with the others. They stripped us of our belongings, cameras, cash, passports, everything, then demanded that we lay flat. The tall one said in Arabic, "Shoot them." We resisted at first, but as we were pushed onto our stomachs, I could feel myself giving in to my fate. I thought we would be killed. Then another soldier responded, "You can't. They're Americans." We survived that moment, but our journey had only just begun. It was the beginning of a week-long road trip of violence and brutal intimidation, one that none of us will ever forget. The last we saw Mohammed, our driver, moments before we were yanked out of his car, and he has not been seen since. Our efforts to locate him continue. 4 weeks ago, I was on a short flight to DC and landed there, turned on my cell phone, found an unusual text message from a friend I hadn't heard from for a long time, asking me to call right away. I dialed and he picked up. "Can you believe Hondros is dead?" he said. I went numb. He had been killed along with Tim Hetherington, another photojournalist, by a rocket in Libya just a few hours earlier. Just after his burial in North Carolina, a relative of his approached me and asked me a question. "Is it worth it?" he said. "Of course not," I answered. "A photograph is never worth your life." "Then why do you continue to do it?" he asked. This is the question. You certainly don't have to go to war, and you don't have to risk personal harm to be faced with it. It's a question that can apply to all of you here, should you consider taking the road less traveled. Why do we feel compelled to do things that are counter to what we are told to do or what we are expected to do? For me, the short answer is the gratification of my photographs being published and the influence that they might have. I want readers to react to them, to be moved by them, to be motivated, saddened, happy, or angry. There's no more satisfying feeling for me than capturing someone's experience and then sharing it with the readers who will form opinions shaped by that photograph. And I believe there's a duty, in spite of the risks and difficult moral choices, that the world know what is happening in places like Libya, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I appreciate my life in a way I would have never understood without witnessing how quickly everything can be taken away from you. When you leave here, your own experiences will change and shape you as well. Your journey will take you down 1,000 roads, and along the way, you'll meet people from all walks of life. Your mistakes along the way will teach you things that no classroom could have prepared you for, and those lessons accumulate. You'll become wiser, and soon you'll be shifting gears automatically. You won't be asking how, because you'll already have the answer. Hondros, like all of us working in this field, knew that there was no invisible shield protecting him from the bullets and bombs and carnage that he documented. The last photographs he took before his death are a testament to the personal sacrifice he made to show the world what was happening in Libya. This job requires you to put aside your apprehensions about whether you'll make enough money or have the security of a steady job. It's not about vanity or awards, what your business card says, or praise from your boss from doing a good job that day. It's about being so passionate about something, anything, that you accept the risks as a byproduct because you believe in what you do and you allow it to define you as a person. You will all have the opportunity to discover what moves you, whatever that may be, and pursue it with spirit. You leave here with not only knowledge and a diploma, but the ability to make a difference in the world. The tool you use to do that is up to you. You have an enormous responsibility to help end these wars. What you learn here at BU allows you to continue to do this, whether those efforts are made here or in another country. Off the battleground, war creates an endless ripple of issues that need attention. Disease, poverty, starvation. There are millions of people displaced around the world. And it's a vicious cycle because these problems will spawn yet more conflict. The casualties of our wars come home and begin the long and painful recovery. These men and women arrive almost daily, brain damaged and missing limbs. This upcoming period of uncertainty, the blurry line between graduation and employment, is the freest you'll ever be. Embrace it and use it to explore the world and to find your place to improve it. You are young, be brave, take chances, and congratulations.